Power rests on the kind of knowledge that one holds. What is the sense of knowing things that are useless? They will not prepare us for our unavoidable encounter with the unknown. Nothing in this world is a gift. Whatever has to be learned must be learned the hard way. A man goes to knowledge as he goes to war, wide awake, with fear, with respect, and with absolute assurance. Going to knowledge or going to war in any other manner is a mistake, and whoever makes it might never live to regret it. When a man has fulfilled all four of these requisites, to be wide awake, to have fear, respect, and absolute assurance, there are no mistakes for which he will have to account. Under such conditions, his actions lose the blundering quality of the acts of a fool. If such a man fails or suffers a defeat, he will have lost only a battle, and there will be no pitiful regrets over that. Dwelling upon the self too much produces a terrible fatigue. A man in that position is deaf and blind to everything else. The fatigue itself makes him cease to see the marvels all around him. Every time a man sets himself to learn, he has to labor as hard as anyone can. And the limits of his learning are determined by his own nature. Therefore, there is no point in talking about knowledge. Fear of knowledge is natural. All of us experience it. And there is nothing we can do about it. But no matter how frightening learning is, it is more terrible to think of a man without knowledge. To be angry at people means that one considers their acts to be important. It is imperative to cease to feel that way. The acts of men cannot be important enough to offset our only viable alternative, our unchangeable encounter with infinity. Anything is one of a million paths. Therefore, a warrior must always keep in mind that a path is only a path. If he feels that he should not follow it, he must not stay with it under any conditions. His decision to keep on that path or to leave it must be free of fear or ambition. He must look at every path closely and deliberately. There is a question that a warrior has to ask mandatorily. Does this path have a heart? All paths are the same. They lead nowhere. However, a path without a heart is never enjoyable. On the other hand, a path with heart is easy. It does not make a warrior work at liking it. It makes for a joyful journey. As long as a man follows it, he is one with it. There is a world of happiness where there is no difference between things because there is no one there to ask about the difference. But that is not the world of men. Some men have the vanity to believe that they live in two worlds. But that is only their vanity. There is but one single world for us. We are men and must follow the world of men contentedly. A man has four natural enemies: fear, clarity, power, and old age. Fear, clarity, and power can be overcome, but not old age. Its effect can be postponed. but it can never be overcome. A warrior knows that he is only a man. His only regret is that his life is so short that he can't grab onto all the things that he would like to. But for him, this is not an issue. It's only a pity. Feeling important makes one heavy, clumsy, and vain. To be a warrior, one needs to be light and fluid. When they are seen as fields of energy, human beings appear to be like fibers of light, like white cobwebs, very fine threads that circulate from the head to the toes. Thus to the eye of a seer, a man looks like an egg of circulating fibers, and his arms and legs are like luminous bristles, bursting out in all directions. The seer sees that every man is in touch with everything else, not through his hands, but through a bunch of long fibers that shoot out in all directions from the center of his abdomen. Those fibers join a man to his surroundings. They keep his balance. They give him stability. When a warrior learns to see, he sees that a man is a luminous egg, whether he is a beggar or a king, and there is no way to change anything. Or rather, what could be changed in that luminous egg? What? A warrior never worries about his fear. Instead, he thinks about the wonders of seeing the flow of energy. The rest is frills, unimportant frills. Only a crackpot would undertake the task of becoming a man of knowledge, of his own accord. A sober-headed man has to be tricked into doing it. There are scores of people who would gladly undertake the task, but those don't count. They are usually cracked. They are like gourds that look fine from the outside, and yet they would leak the minute you put pressure on them, the minute you fill them with water. When a man is not concerned with seeing, things look very much the same to him every time he looks at the world. When he learns to see, on the other hand, nothing is ever the same every time he sees it, and yet it is the same. To the eye of a seer, man is like an egg. Every time he sees the same man, he sees a luminous egg. Yet it is not the same luminous egg. The shamans of ancient Mexico gave the name allies to inexplicable forces that acted upon them. They called them allies because they thought they could use them to their heart's content, a notion that proved nearly fatal to those shamans. Because what they called an ally is a being without corporeal essence that exists in the universe. Modern-day shamans call them inorganic beings. To ask what function the allies have is like asking what we men do in this world. We are here, that's all. And the allies are here like us. And maybe they were here before us. The most effective way to live is as a warrior. A warrior may worry and think before making any decision, but once he makes it, he goes on his way, free from worries or thoughts. There will be a million other decisions, still awaiting him. That's the warrior's way. A warrior thinks of his death when things become unclear. The idea of death is the only thing that tempers his spirit. Death is everywhere. It may be the headlights of a car on a hilltop in the distance behind. They may remain visible for a while and disappear into the darkness as if they had been scooped away, only to appear on another hilltop and then disappear again. Those are the lights on the head of death. Death puts them on like a hat and then shoots off on a gallop, gaining on us, getting closer and closer. Sometimes it turns off its lights, but death never stops. A warrior must know first that his acts are useless, and yet he must proceed as if he didn't know it. That's a shaman's controlled folly. The eyes of man can perform two functions. One is seeing energy at large as it flows in the universe, and the other is looking at things in this world. Neither of these functions is better than the other. However, to train the eyes only to look is a shameful and unnecessary loss. A warrior lives by acting, not by thinking about acting, nor by thinking about what he will think when he has finished acting. A warrior chooses a path with heart, any path with heart, and follows it. And then he rejoices and laughs. He knows, because he sees that his life will be over altogether too soon. He sees that nothing is more important than anything else. A warrior has no honor, no dignity, no family, no name, no country. He has only life to be lived. And under these circumstances, his only tie to his fellow men is his controlled folly. Nothing being more important than anything else, a warrior chooses any act and acts it out as if it mattered to him. His controlled folly makes him say that what he does matters, and makes him act as if it did, and yet he knows that it doesn't. So when he fulfills his acts, he retreats in peace. And whether his acts were good or bad, or worked or didn't, is in no way part of his concern. A warrior may choose to remain totally impassive and never act, and behave as if being impassive really mattered to him. He would be rightfully true at that too, because that would also be his controlled folly. There is no emptiness in the life of a warrior. Everything is filled to the brim. Everything is filled to the brim, and everything is equal. An average man is too concerned with liking people or with being liked himself. A warrior likes, that's all. He likes whatever or whomever he wants, for the hell of it. A warrior takes responsibility for his acts, for the most trivial of his acts. An average man acts out his thoughts and never takes responsibility for what he does. The average man is either victorious or defeated, and depending on that, he becomes a persecutor or a victim. These two conditions are prevalent as long as one does not see. Seeing dispels the illusion of victory or defeat or suffering. A warrior knows that he is waiting and what he is waiting for, and while he waits, he wants nothing, and thus whatever little thing he gets is more than he can take. If he needs to eat, he finds a way. because he is not hungry. If something hurts his body, he finds a way to stop it, because he is not in pain. To be hungry, or to be in pain, means that the man is not a warrior, and the forces of his hunger and pain will destroy him. Denying oneself is an indulgence. The indulgence of denying is by far the worst. It forces us to believe that we are doing great things, while in effect we are only fixed within ourselves. Intent is not a thought or an object or a wish. Intent is what can make a man succeed when his thoughts tell him that he is defeated. It operates in spite of the warrior's indulgence. Intent is what makes him invulnerable. Intent is what sends a shaman through a wall, through space, to infinity. When a man embarks on the warrior's path, he becomes aware in a gradual manner that ordinary life has been left forever behind. The means of the ordinary world are no longer a buffer for him, and he must adopt a new way of life if he is going to survive. Every bit of knowledge that becomes power has death as its central force. Death lends the ultimate touch, and whatever is touched by death indeed becomes power. Only the idea of death makes a warrior sufficiently detached, so that he is capable of abandoning himself to anything. He knows his death is stalking him, and won't give him time to cling to anything. So he tries, without craving, all of everything. We are men, and our lot is to learn and to be hurled into inconceivable new worlds. A warrior who sees energy knows that there is no end to the new worlds for our vision. Death is a twirl. Death is a shiny cloud over the horizon. Death is me talking to you. Death is you and your writing pad. Death is nothing, nothing. It is here, yet it isn't here at all. The spirit of a warrior is not geared to indulging and complaining, nor is it geared to winning or losing. The spirit of a warrior is geared only to struggle, and every struggle is a warrior's last battle on earth. Thus the outcome matters very little to him. In his last battle on earth, a warrior lets his spirit flow free and clear. And as he wages his battle, knowing that his intent is impeccable, a warrior laughs and laughs. We talk to ourselves incessantly about our world. In fact, we maintain our world with our internal talk. And whenever we finish talking to ourselves about ourselves and our world, the world is always as it should be. We renew it. We rekindle it with life. We uphold it with our internal talk. Not only that, we also choose our paths as we talk to ourselves. Thus, we repeat the same choices over and over until the day we die, because we keep on repeating the same internal talk over and over until the day we die. A warrior is aware of this and strives to stop his internal talk. The world is all that is encased here: life, death, people, and everything else that surrounds us. The world is incomprehensible. We won't ever understand it. We won't ever unravel its secrets. Thus we must treat it as it is, a sheer mystery. The things that people do cannot under any conditions be more important than the world. And thus a warrior treats the world as an endless mystery, and what people do as an endless folly. We hardly ever realize that we can cut anything out of our lives, anytime, in the blink of an eye. One shouldn't worry about taking pictures or making tape recordings. Those are superfluities of sedate lives. One should worry about a spirit which is always receding. A warrior doesn't need personal history. One day he finds it is no longer necessary for him, and he drops it. Personal history must be constantly renewed by telling parents, relatives and friends everything one does. On the other hand, for the warrior who has no personal history, no explanations are needed. Nobody is angry or disillusioned with his acts, and above all, no one pins him down with their thoughts and their expectations. When nothing is for sure, we remain alert, perennially on our toes. It is more exciting not to know which bush the rabbit is hiding behind than to behave as though we knew everything. As long as a man feels that he is the most important thing in the world, he cannot really appreciate the world around him. He is like a horse with blinkers. All he sees is himself, apart from everything else. Death is our eternal companion. It is always to our left, an arm's length behind us. Death is the only wise adviser that a warrior has. Whenever he feels that everything is going wrong and he is about to be annihilated, he can turn to his death and ask if that is so. His death will tell him that he is wrong, that nothing really matters outside its touch. His death will tell him, "I haven't touched you yet." Whenever a warrior decides to do something, he must go all the way, but he must take responsibility for what he does. No matter what he does, he must know first why he is doing it. And then he must proceed with his actions without having doubts or remorse about them. In a world where death is the hunter, there is no time for regrets or doubts. There is only time for decisions. It doesn't matter what the decisions are. Nothing could be more or less serious than anything else. In a world where death is the hunter, there are no small or big decisions. There are only decisions that the warrior makes in the face of his inevitable death. A warrior must learn to be available and unavailable at the precise turn of the road. It is useless for a warrior to be unwittingly available at all times, as it is useless for him to hide when everybody knows that he is hiding. For a warrior, to be inaccessible means that he touches the world around him sparingly, and above all, he deliberately avoids exhausting himself and others. He doesn't use and squeeze people until they have shriveled to nothing, especially the people he loves. Once a man worries, he clings to anything out of desperation. And once he clings, he is bound to get exhausted or to exhaust whomever or whatever he is clinging to. A warrior hunter, on the other hand, knows he will lure game into his traps over and over again, so he doesn't worry. To worry is to become accessible, unwittingly accessible. A warrior hunter deals intimately with his world, and yet he is inaccessible to that same world. He taps it lightly, stays for as long as he needs to, and then swiftly moves away, leaving hardly a mark. To be a warrior hunter is not just to trap game. A warrior hunter does not catch game because he sets his traps or because he knows the routines of his prey, but because he himself has no routines. This is the advantage. He is not at all like the animals he is after, fixed by heavy routines and predictable quirks. He is free, fluid, unpredictable. For an average man, the world is weird because if he is not bored with it, he is at odds with it. For a warrior, the world is weird because it is stupendous, awesome, mysterious, unfathomable. A warrior must assume responsibility for being here, in this marvelous world, in this marvelous time. A warrior must learn to make every act count, since he is going to be here in this world for only a short while, in fact too short for witnessing all the marvels of it. Acts have power, especially when the warrior acting knows that those acts are his last battle. There is a strange consuming happiness in acting with the full knowledge that whatever he is doing may very well be his last act on earth. A warrior must focus his attention on the link between himself and his death, without remorse or sadness or worrying. He must focus his attention on the fact that he does not have time and let his acts flow accordingly. He must let each of his acts be his last battle on earth. Only under those conditions will his acts have their rightful power. Otherwise they will be, for as long as he lives, the acts of a fool. A warrior hunter knows that his death is waiting, and the very act he is performing now may well be his last battle on earth. He calls it a battle because it is a struggle. Most people move from act to act without any struggle or thought. A warrior hunter, on the contrary, assesses every act. And since he has an intimate knowledge of his death, he proceeds judiciously, as if every act were his last battle. Only a fool would fail to notice the advantage a warrior hunter has over his fellow men. A warrior hunter gives his last battle its due respect. It's only natural that his last act on earth should be the best of himself. It's pleasurable that way. It dulls the edge of his fright. A warrior is an immaculate hunter who hunts power. He is not drunk or crazed, and he has neither the time nor the disposition to bluff or to lie to himself, or to make a wrong move. The stakes are too high for that. The stakes are his trimmed, orderly life, which he has taken so long to tighten and perfect. He is not going to throw that away by making some stupid miscalculation, by mistaking something for something else. A man, any man, deserves everything that is a man's lot, joy, pain, sadness and struggle. The nature of his acts is unimportant, as long as he acts as a warrior. If his spirit is distorted, he should simply fix it, purge it, make it perfect. Because there is no other task in our entire lives which is more worthwhile. Not to fix the spirit is to seek death, and that is the same as to seek nothing, since death is going to overtake us regardless of anything. To seek the perfection of the warrior spirit is the only task worthy of our temporariness and our manhood. The hardest thing in the world is to assume the mood of a warrior. It is of no use to be sad and complain and feel justified in doing so, believing that someone is always doing something to us. Nobody is doing anything to anybody, much less to a warrior. A warrior is a hunter. He calculates everything. That's control. Once his calculations are over, he acts. He lets go. That's abandon. A warrior is not a leaf at the mercy of the wind. No one can push him. No one can make him do things against himself or against his better judgment. A warrior is tuned to survive, and he survives in the best of all possible fashions. A warrior is only a man, a humble man. He cannot change the designs of his death. But his impeccable spirit, which has stored power after stupendous hardships, can certainly hold his death for a moment long enough to let him rejoice for the last time in recalling his power. We may say that is a gesture which death has with those who have an impeccable spirit. It doesn't matter how one was brought up. What determines the way one does anything is personal power. A man is only the sum of his personal power, and that sum determines how he lives and how he dies. Personal power is a feeling, something like being lucky, or one may call it a mood. Personal power is something that one acquires by means of a lifetime of struggle. A warrior acts as if he knows what he is doing, when in effect he knows nothing. A warrior doesn't know remorse for anything he has done, because to isolate one's acts as being mean or ugly or evil is to place an unwarranted importance on the self. The trick is in what one emphasizes. We either make ourselves miserable or we make ourselves strong. The amount of work is the same. People tell us from the time we are born that the world is such and such and so, and naturally we have no choice but to accept that the world is the way people have been telling us it is. The art of a warrior is to balance the terror of being a man with the wonder of being a man. The self-confidence of the warrior is not the self-confidence of the average man. The average man seeks certainty in the eyes of the onlooker and calls that self-confidence. The warrior seeks impeccability in his own eyes and calls that humbleness. The average man is hooked to his fellow men, while the warrior is hooked only to infinity. There are lots of things a warrior can do at a certain time which he couldn't do years before. Those things themselves did not change. What changed was his idea of himself. The only possible course that a warrior has is to act consistently and without reservations. At a certain moment, he knows enough of the warrior's way to act accordingly, but his old habits and routines may stand in his way. If a warrior is to succeed in anything, the success must come gently, with a great deal of effort, but with no stress or obsession. The internal dialogue is what grounds people in the daily world. The world is such and so only because we talk to ourselves about its being such and so and so. The passageway into the world of shamans opens up after the warrior has learned to shut off his internal dialogue. To change our idea of the world is the crux of shamanism, and stopping the internal dialogue is the only way to accomplish it. When a warrior learns to stop the internal dialogue, everything becomes possible. The most far-fetched schemes become attainable. A warrior takes his lot, whatever it may be, and accepts it in ultimate humbleness. He accepts in humbleness what he is, not as grounds for regret, but as a living challenge. The humbleness of a warrior is not the humbleness of the beggar. The warrior lowers his head to no one, but at the same time he doesn't permit anyone to lower his head to him. The beggar, on the other hand, falls to his knees at the drop of a hat, and scrapes the floor for anyone he deems to be higher, but at the same time he demands that someone lower than him scrape the floor for him. Solace, haven, fear, all of these are words which have created moods that one has learned to accept without ever questioning their value. Our fellow men are black magicians, and whoever is with them is a black magician on the spot. Think for a moment. Can you deviate from the path that your fellow men have lined up for you? And if you remain with them, your thoughts and your actions are fixed forever in their terms. That is slavery. The warrior, on the other hand, is free from all that. Freedom is expensive, but the price is not impossible to pay. So, fear your captors, your masters. Don't waste your time and your power fearing freedom. The flaw with words is that they always make us feel enlightened. But when we turn around to face the world, they always fail us, and we end up facing the world as we always have, without enlightenment. For this reason, a warrior seeks to act rather than to talk, and to this effect he gets a new description of the world, a new description where talking is not that important, and where new acts have new reflections. A warrior considers himself already dead, so there is nothing for him to lose. The worst has already happened to him. Therefore he is clear and calm. Judging him by his acts or by his words, one would never suspect that he has witnessed everything. Knowledge is a most peculiar affair. especially for a warrior. Knowledge for a warrior is something that comes at once, engulfs him, and passes on. Knowledge comes to a warrior floating like specks of gold dust, the same dust that covers the wings of moths. So for a warrior, knowledge is like taking a shower, or being rained on by specks of dark gold dust. Whenever the internal dialogue stops, the world collapses, and extraordinary facets of ourselves surface, as though they had been kept heavily guarded by our words. The world is unfathomable, and so are we, and so is every being that exists in this world. Warriors do not win victories by beating their heads against walls, but by overtaking the walls. Warriors jump over walls, they don't demolish them. A warrior must cultivate the feeling that he has everything needed for the extravagant journey that is his life. What counts for a warrior is being alive. Life in itself is sufficient, self-explanatory, and complete. Therefore, one may say, without being presumptuous, that the experience of experiences is being alive. An average man thinks that indulging in doubts and tribulations is the sign of sensitivity, spirituality. The truth of the matter is that the average man is the farthest thing imaginable from being sensitive. His puny reason deliberately makes itself into a monster or a saint, but it is truthfully too little for such a big monster or saint mode. To be a warrior is not a simple matter of wishing to be one. It is rather an endless struggle that will go on to the very last moment of our lives. Nobody is born a warrior in exactly the same way that nobody is born an average man. We make ourselves into one or the other. A warrior dies the hard way. His death must struggle to take him. A warrior does not give himself to death so easily. Human beings are not objects. They have no solidity. They are round, luminous beings. They are boundless. The world of objects and solidity is only a description that was created to help them, to make their passage on earth convenient. Their reason makes them forget that the description is only a description, and before they realize it, human beings have entrapped the totality of themselves in a vicious circle from which they rarely emerge in their lifetimes. Human beings are perceivers. The world that they perceive is an illusion created by the description that was told to them from the moment they were born. So, in essence, the world that their reason wants to sustain is the world created by a description, and its dogmatic and inviolable rules, which their reason learns to accept and defend. The concealed advantage of luminous beings is that they have something which is never used: intent. The maneuver of shamans is the same as the maneuver of the average man. Both have a description of the world. The average man upholds it with his reason. The shaman upholds it with his intent. Both descriptions have their rules, but the advantage of the shaman is that intent is more engulfing than reason. Only as a warrior can one withstand the path of knowledge. A warrior cannot complain or regret anything. His life is an endless challenge, and challenges cannot possibly be good or bad. Challenges are simply challenges. The basic difference between an ordinary man and a warrior is that a warrior takes everything as a challenge, while an ordinary man takes everything as a blessing or as a curse. The trump card of the warrior is that he believes without believing. But obviously a warrior can't just say he believes and let it go at that. That would be too easy. To just believe without any exertion would exonerate him from examining his situation. A warrior, whenever he has to involve himself with believing, does it as a choice. A warrior doesn't believe. A warrior has to believe. Death is the indispensable ingredient in having to believe. Without the awareness of death, everything is ordinary, trivial. It is only because death is stalking him that a warrior has to believe that the world is an unfathomable mystery. Having to believe in such a fashion is the warrior's expression of his innermost predilection. Power always makes a cubic centimeter of chance available to a warrior. The warrior's act is to be perennially fluid in order to pluck it. The average man is aware of everything only when he thinks he should be. The condition of a warrior, however, is to be aware of everything at all times. The totality of ourselves is a very mysterious affair. We need only a very small portion of it to fulfill the most complex tasks of life. Yet when we die with the totality of ourselves. A rule of thumb for a warrior is that he makes his decisions so carefully that nothing that may happen as a result of them can surprise him, much less drain his power. When a warrior makes his decision to take action, he should be prepared to die. If he is prepared to die, there shouldn't be any pitfalls, any unwelcome surprises, any unnecessary acts. Everything should gently fall into place, because he is expecting nothing. A warrior as a teacher must first of all teach about the possibility of acting without believing, without expecting rewards, acting just for the hell of it. His success as a teacher depends on how well and how harmoniously he guides his words in this specific respect. In order to help his word to erase personal history, the warrior as a teacher teaches 3 techniques: losing self-importance, assuming responsibility for one's acts, and using death as an advisor. Without the beneficial effect of these three techniques, erasing personal history would involve being shifty, evasive, and unnecessarily dubious about oneself and one's actions. There is no way to get rid of self-pity for good. It has a definite place and character in our lives, a definite facade which is recognizable. Thus, every time the occasion arises, the facade of self-pity becomes active. It has a history. But if one changes the facade, one shifts its place of prominence. One changes facades by shifting the component elements of the facade itself. Self-pity is useful to the user because he feels important and deserving of better conditions, better treatment, or because he is unwilling to assume responsibility for the acts that brought him to the state that elicited self-pity. Changing the facade of self-pity means that one has assigned a secondary place to a formerly important element. Self-pity is still a prominent feature, but it has now taken a position in the background. In the same fashion that the idea of one's impending death, the idea of a warrior's humbleness, or the idea of responsibility for one's acts were all in the background at one time for a warrior, without ever being used until the moment he became a warrior. A warrior acknowledges his pain, but he doesn't indulge in it. The mood of the warrior who enters into the unknown is not one of sadness. On the contrary, he is joyful, because he feels humbled by his great fortune, confident that his spirit is impeccable, and above all, fully aware of his efficiency. A warrior's joyfulness comes from having accepted his fate, and from having truthfully assessed what lies ahead of him. When one has nothing to lose, one becomes courageous. We are timid only when there is something we can still cling to. A warrior could not possibly leave anything to chance. He actually affects the outcome of events by the force of his awareness and his unbending intent. If a warrior wants to pay back for all the favors he has received, and he has no one in particular to address his payment to, he can address it to the spirit of man. That's always a very small account. And whatever one puts in it is more than enough. After arranging the world in a most beautiful and enlightened manner, the scholar goes back home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in order to forget his beautiful arrangement. The human form is a conglomerate of energy fields which exist in the universe and which is related exclusively to human beings. Shamans call it the human form because those energy fields have been bent and contorted by a lifetime of habits and misuse. A warrior knows that he cannot change, and yet he makes it his business to try to change, nevertheless. The warrior is never disappointed when he fails to change. That's the only advantage a warrior has over the average man. Warriors must be impeccable in their effort to change, in order to scare the human form and shake it away. After years of impeccability, a moment will come when the human form cannot stand it any longer and leaves. That is to say, a moment will come when the energy fields contorted by a lifetime of habit are straightened out. A warrior gets deeply affected and can even die as a result of this straightening out of energy fields. But an impeccable warrior always survives. The only freedom warriors have is to behave impeccably. Not only is impeccability freedom, it is the only way to straighten out the human form. Any habit needs all its parts in order to function. If some parts are missing, the habit is disassembled. The fight is right here on this earth. We are human creatures. Who knows what's waiting for us, or what kind of power we may have? The world of people goes up and down, and people go up and down with their world. Warriors have no business following the ups and downs of their fellow men. The core of our being is the act of perceiving, and the magic of our being is the act of awareness. Perception and awareness are a single, functional, inextricable unit. We choose only once. We choose either to be warriors or to be ordinary men. A second choice does not exist. Not on this earth. The warrior's way offers a man a new life, and that life has to be completely new. He can't bring to that new life his ugly old ways. Warriors always take a first event of any series as the blueprint or the map of what is going to develop for them subsequently. Human beings love to be told what to do, but they love even more to fight and not do what they are told. And thus they get entangled in hating the one who told them in the first place. Everybody has personal power for something. The trick for the warrior is to pull his personal power away from his weaknesses to his warrior's purpose. Everyone can see, and yet we choose not to remember what we see. The art of dreaming is the capacity to utilize one's ordinary dreams and transform them into controlled awareness by virtue of a specialized form of attention called the dreaming attention. The art of stalking is a set of procedures and attitudes that enables a warrior to get the best out of any conceivable situation. the recommendation for warriors is not to have any material things on which to focus their power, but to focus it on the spirit, on the true flight into the unknown, not on trivialities. Everyone who wants to follow the warrior's path has to rid himself of the compulsion to possess and hold on to things. Seeing is a bodily knowledge. The predominance of the visual sense in us influences this bodily knowledge and makes it seem to be eye-related. Losing the human form is like a spiral. It gives a warrior the freedom to remember himself as straight fields of energy, and this in turn makes him even freer. A warrior knows that he is waiting, and he knows what he is waiting for, and while he waits, he feasts his eyes upon the world. A warrior's ultimate accomplishment is to enjoy the joy of infinity. The course of a warrior's destiny is unalterable. The challenge is how far he can go and how impeccable he can be within those rigid bounds. People's actions no longer affect a warrior when he has no more expectations of any kind. A strange peace becomes the ruling force in his life. He has adopted one of the concepts of a warrior's life, detachment. Detachment does not automatically mean wisdom, but it is nonetheless an advantage, because it allows the warrior to pause momentarily, to reassess situations, to reconsider positions. In order to use that extra moment consistently and correctly, however, a warrior has to struggle unyieldingly for the duration of his life. I am already given to the power that rules my fate, and I cling to nothing, so I will have nothing to defend. I have no thoughts, so I will see. I fear nothing, so I will remember myself. Detached and at ease, I will dart past the eagle to be free. It is much easier for warriors to fare well under conditions of maximum stress than to be impeccable under normal circumstances. Human beings are two-sided. The right side encompasses everything the intellect can conceive of. The left side is a realm of indescribable features, a realm impossible to contain in words. The left side is perhaps comprehended, if comprehension is what takes place, with the total body. Thus its resistance to conceptualization. All the faculties, possibilities, and accomplishments of shamanism, from the simplest to the most astounding, are in the human body itself. The power that governs the destiny of all living beings is called the eagle. Not because it is an eagle or has anything to do with an eagle. but because it appears to the eye of the seer as an immeasurable jet black eagle, standing erect as an eagle stands, its height reaching to infinity. The eagle devours the awareness of all the creatures that, alive on earth, a moment before and now dead, have floated to the eagle's beak like a swarm of fireflies, to meet their owner, their reason for having had life. The eagle disentangles these tiny flames, lays them flat as a tanner stretches out a hide, and then consumes them. For awareness is the eagle's food. The eagle, that power that governs the destinies of all living things, reflects equally and at once all those living things. There is no way, therefore, for man to pray to the eagle, to ask favors, to hope for grace. The human part of the eagle is too insignificant to move the whole. Every living thing has been granted the power, if it so desires, to seek an opening to freedom and go through it. It is evident to the seer, who sees the opening, and to the creatures that go through it, that the eagle has granted that gift in order to perpetuate awareness. To cross over to freedom does not mean eternal life as eternity is commonly understood, that is, as living forever. Rather, warriors can keep their awareness, which is ordinarily relinquished at the moment of dying. At the moment of crossing, the body in its entirety is kindled with knowledge. Every cell at once becomes aware of itself and also aware of the totality of the body. The eagle's gift of freedom is not a bestowal, but a chance to have a chance. A warrior is never under siege. To be under siege implies that one has personal possessions that could be blockaded. A warrior has nothing in the world except his impeccability, and impeccability cannot be threatened. The first principle of the art of stalking is that warriors choose their battleground. A warrior never goes into battle without knowing what the surroundings are. To discard everything that is unnecessary is the second principle of the art of stalking. A warrior doesn't complicate things. He aims at being simple. He applies all the concentration he has to decide whether or not to enter into battle, for any battle is a battle for his life. This is the third principle of the art of stalking. A warrior must be willing and ready to make his last stand here and now, but not in a helter-skelter way. A warrior relaxes and abandons himself. He fears nothing. Only then will the powers that guide human beings open the road for a warrior and aid him. Only then. That is the fourth principle of the art of stalking. When faced with odds that cannot be dealt with, warriors retreat for a moment. They let their minds meander. They occupy their time with something else. Anything would do. That is the fifth principle of the art of stalking. Warriors compress time. This is the sixth principle of the art of stalking. Even an instant counts. In the battle of your life, a second is an eternity that may decide the outcome. Warriors aim at succeeding, therefore they compress time. Warriors don't waste an instant. In order to apply the seventh principle of the art of stalking, one has to apply the other six. A stalker never pushes himself to the front. He is always looking on from behind the scenes. Applying these principles brings about three results. The first is that stalkers learn never to take themselves seriously. They learn to laugh at themselves. If they are not afraid of being a fool, they can fool anyone. The second is that stalkers learn to have endless patience. Stalkers are never in a hurry. They never fret. And the third is that stalkers learn to have an endless capacity to improvise. Warriors face the oncoming time. Normally we face time as it recedes from us. Only warriors can change that and face time as it advances on them. Warriors have only one thing in mind, their freedom. To die and be eaten by the eagle is no challenge. On the other hand, to sneak around the eagle and be free is the ultimate audacity. When warriors talk about time, they are not referring to something which is measured by the movement of a clock. Time is the essence of attention. The eagle's emanations are made out of time, and properly speaking, when a warrior enters into other aspects of the self, he is becoming acquainted with time. A warrior can no longer weep, and his only expression of anguish is a shiver that comes from the very depth of the universe. It is as if one of the eagle's emanations were made out of pure anguish, and when it hits a warrior, the warrior's shiver is infinite. There is no completeness without sadness and longing, for without them there is no sobriety, no kindness. Wisdom without kindness and knowledge without sobriety are useless. Self-importance is man's greatest enemy. What weakens him is feeling offended by the deeds and misdeeds of his fellow men. Self-importance requires that one spend most of one's life offended by something or someone. In order to follow the path of knowledge, one has to be very imaginative. On the path of knowledge, nothing is as clear as we would like it to be. If seers can hold their own in facing petty tyrants, they can certainly face the unknown with impunity, and then they can even withstand the presence of the unknowable. What seems natural is to think that the warrior who can hold his own in the face of the unknown can certainly face petty tyrants with impunity. But that's not necessarily so. What destroyed the superb warriors of ancient times was to rely on that assumption. Nothing can temper the spirit of a warrior as much as the challenge of dealing with impossible people in positions of power. Only under those conditions can warriors acquire the sobriety and serenity to withstand the pressure of the unknowable. The unknown is something that is veiled from man, shrouded perhaps by a terrifying context, but which, nonetheless, is within man's reach. The unknown becomes the known at a given time. The unknowable, on the other hand, is the indescribable, the unthinkable, the unrealizable. It is something that will never be known to us, and yet it is there, dazzling, and at the same time horrifying in its vastness. We perceive. This is a hard fact, but what we perceive is not a fact of the same kind, because we learn what we perceive. Warriors say that we think there is a world of objects out there only because of our awareness. But what is really out there are the ego's emanations, fluid, forever in motion, and yet unchanged, eternal. The deepest flaw of unseasoned warriors is that they are willing to forget the wonder of what they see. They become overwhelmed by the fact that they see and believe that it is their genius that counts. A seasoned warrior must be a paragon of discipline in order to override the nearly invincible laxness of our human condition. More important than seeing itself is what warriors do with what they see. One of the greatest forces in the lives of warriors is fear, because it spurs them to learn. For a seer, the truth is that all living beings are struggling to die. What stops death is awareness. The unknown is forever present, but it is outside the possibility of our normal awareness. The unknown is the superfluous part of the average man, and it is superfluous because the average man does not have enough free energy to grasp it. The greatest flaw of human beings is to remain glued to the inventory of reason. Reason doesn't deal with man as energy. Reason deals with instruments that create energy, but it has never seriously occurred to reason that we are better than instruments. We are organisms that create energy. We are bubbles of energy. Warriors who deliberately attain total awareness are a sight to behold. That is the moment when they burn from within. The fire from within consumes them, and in full awareness they fuse themselves to the emanations of the ego at large and glide into eternity. Once inner silence is attained, everything is possible. The way to stop talking to ourselves is to use exactly the same method used to teach us to talk to ourselves. We were taught compulsively and unwaveringly, and this is the way we must stop it, compulsively and unwaveringly. Impeccability begins with a single act that has to be deliberate, precise, and sustained. If that act is repeated long enough, one acquires a sense of unbending intent, which can be applied to anything else. If that is accomplished, the road is clear. One thing will lead to another until the warrior realizes his full potential. The mystery of awareness is darkness. Human beings reek of that mystery of things which are inexplicable. To regard ourselves in any other terms is madness. So a warrior doesn't demean the mystery of man by trying to rationalize it. Realizations are of two kinds. One is just pep talk, great outbursts of emotion and nothing more. The other is the product of a shift of the assemblage point. It is not coupled with an emotional outburst, but with action. The emotional realizations come years later, after warriors have solidified by usage the new position of their assemblage points. The worst that could happen to us is that we have to die, and since that is already our unalterable fate, we are free. Those who have lost everything no longer have anything to fear. Warriors don't venture into the unknown out of greed. Greed works only in the world of ordinary affairs. To venture into that terrifying loneliness of the unknown, one must have something greater than greed, love. One needs love for life, for intrigue, for mystery. One needs unquenchable curiosity and guts galore. A warrior thinks only of the mysteries of awareness. Mystery is all that matters. We are living beings. We have to die and relinquish our awareness. But if we could change just a tinge of that, what mysteries must await us? What mysteries? It isn't that the warrior learns shamanism as time goes by. Rather, what he learns as time goes by is to save energy. This energy will enable him to handle some of the energy fields which are ordinarily inaccessible to him. Shamanism is a state of awareness, the ability to use energy fields. that are not employed in perceiving the everyday life world that we know. In the universe there is an immeasurable, indescribable force which shamans call intent, and absolutely everything that exists in the entire cosmos is attached to intent by a connecting link. Warriors are concerned with discussing, understanding, and employing that connecting link. They are especially concerned with cleaning it of the numbing effects brought about by the ordinary concerns of their everyday lives. Shamanism at this level can be defined as the procedure of cleaning one's connecting link to intent. Shamans are vitally concerned with their past, but not their personal past. For shamans, their past is what other shamans in bygone days have accomplished. They consult their past in order to obtain a point of reference. Only shamans genuinely seek a point of reference in their past. For them, establishing a point of reference means a chance to examine intent. The average man also examines the past, but it's his personal past he examines, for personal reasons. He measures himself against the past, whether his personal past or the past knowledge of his time, in order to find justifications for his present or future behavior, or to establish a model for himself. The spirit manifests itself to a warrior at every turn. However, this is not the entire truth. The entire truth is that the spirit reveals itself to everyone with the same intensity and consistency. But only warriors are consistently attuned to such revelations. Warriors speak of shamanism as a magical, mysterious bird which has paused in its flight for a moment in order to give man hope and purpose. Warriors live under the wing of that bird, which they call the bird of wisdom, the bird of freedom. For a warrior, the spirit is an abstract only because he knows it without words or even thoughts. It is an abstract because he cannot conceive what the spirit is. Yet, without the slightest chance or desire to understand it, a warrior handles the spirit. He recognizes it, beckons it, entices it, becomes familiar with it, and expresses it with his acts. The average man's connecting link with intent is practically dead, and warriors begin with a link that is useless because it does not respond voluntarily. In order to revive that link, warriors need a rigorous, fierce purpose, a special state of mind called unbending intent. The power of man is incalculable. Death exists only because we have intended it since the moment of our birth. The intent of death can be suspended by making the assemblage point change positions. The art of stalking is learning all the quirks of your disguise, and learning them so well that no one will know you are disguised. For that you need to be ruthless, cunning, patient, and sweet. Ruthlessness should not be harshness. Cunning should not be cruelty. Patience should not be negligence, and sweetness should not be foolishness. Warriors have an ulterior purpose for their acts, which has nothing to do with personal gain. The average man acts only if there is chance for profit. Warriors act not for profit, but for the spirit. The shaman seer of ancient times, through their seeing, first noticed that any unusual behavior produced a tremor in the assemblage point. They soon discovered that if unusual behavior is practiced systematically and directed wisely, it eventually forces the assemblage point to move. Silent knowledge is nothing but direct contact with intent. Shamanism is a journey of return. A warrior returns victorious to the spirit, having descended into hell, and from hell he brings trophies. Understanding is one of his trophies. Warriors, because they are stalkers, understand human behavior to perfection. They understand, for instance, that human beings are creatures of inventory. Knowing the ins and outs of a particular inventory is what makes a man a scholar or an expert in his field. Warriors know that when an average person's inventory fails, the person either enlarges his inventory or his world of self-reflection collapses. The average person is able to incorporate new items into his inventory if the new items don't contradict the inventory's underlying order. But if the items contradict that order, the person's mind collapses. The inventory is the mind. Warriors count on this when they attempt to break the mirror of self-reflection. Warriors can never make a bridge to join the people of the world, but if people desire to do so, they have to make a bridge to join warriors. In order for the mysteries of shamanism to be available to anyone, the spirit must descend onto whoever is interested. The spirit lets its presence, by itself, move the man's assemblage point to a specific position. This precise spot is known to shamans as the place of no pity. There really is no procedure involved in making the assemblage point move to the place of no pity. The spirit touches the person and his assemblage point moves. It is as simple as that. What we need to do to allow magic to get hold of us is to banish doubts from our minds. Once doubts are banished, anything is possible. Man's possibilities are so vast and mysterious that warriors, rather than thinking about them, have chosen to explore them, with no hope of ever understanding them.
Everything that warriors do is done as a consequence of a movement of their assemblage points, and such movements are ruled by the amount of energy warriors have at their command. Any movement of the assemblage point means a movement away from an excessive concern with the individual self. Shamans believe it is the position of the assemblage point which makes modern man a homicidal egotist, a being totally involved with his self-image. Having lost hope of ever returning to the source of everything, the average man seeks solace in his selfishness. The thrust of the warrior's way is to dethrone self-importance, and everything warriors do is directed towards accomplishing this goal. Shamans have unmasked self-importance and found that it is self-pity masquerading as something else. In the world of everyday life, one's word or one's decisions can be reversed very easily. The only irrevocable thing in the everyday world is death. In the shaman's world, on the other hand, normal death can be countermanded, but not the shaman's word. In the shaman's world, decisions cannot be changed or revised. Once they have been made, they stand forever. One of the most dramatic things about the human condition is the macabre connection between stupidity and self-reflection. It is stupidity that forces the average man to discard anything that does not conform with his self-reflective expectations. For example, as average men, we are blind to the most crucial piece of knowledge available to a human being: the existence of the assemblage point and the fact that it can move. For the rational man, to hold steadfastly to his self-image ensures his abysmal ignorance. He ignores the fact that shamanism is not incantations and hocus pocus, but the freedom to perceive not only the world taken for granted, but everything else that is humanly possible to accomplish. He trembles at the possibility of freedom, and freedom is at his fingertips. Man's predicament is that he intuits his hidden resources, but he does not dare use them. This is why warriors say that man's plight is the counterpoint between his stupidity and his ignorance. Man needs now more than ever to be taught new ideas that have to do exclusively with his inner world, shaman's ideas, not social ideas. Ideas pertaining to man facing the unknown, facing his personal death. Now, more than anything else, he needs to be taught the secrets of the assemblage point. The spirit listens only when the speaker speaks in gestures, and gestures do not mean signs or body movements, but acts of true abandon, acts of largesse, of humor. As a gesture for the spirit, warriors bring out the best of themselves and silently offer it to the abstract.